This is NHTV2, North Haven Government Television, a service of North Haven Community Television. The following program is brought to you through the support of the Town of North Haven.
So I'd like to convene the Tuesday, April 25th, 2023 North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. I'll ask for the approval of the minutes for the meeting of the Board of Fire Commission meeting held on March 28, 2023. Do I hear a second?
Second, yeah.
I'd also like to ask for approval of the minutes for the special meeting held on April 10th, 2023. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Chief's report.
Good evening, all. Just want to make record of it because it's on the agenda. We did just swear in two of our volunteers before the meeting started on camera anyways. They both completed Firefighter 1. They're both members of West Ridge. And these days, considering how few and far between volunteers are, we couldn't be happier to have them. They completed their Fire 1 program and they're now regular volunteers with our department. So that's going to bring us up to, we're hovering in the high teens right now at the moment. So it's good to see, and we hope for a few more.
And Chief, that was Ronnie Robinson and Jack Mola,
Yep,
right? And West Ridge Company 3.
that's correct.
And we thank them for their willingness to volunteer.
Moving on, Chief's report, I'll start with calls for last year compared to this year. Last year we were at 1,585 alarms. This year we're at 1,501. Our last regular Fire Commission meeting occurred on February 28th, so I'm going to reflect some numbers that have occurred since that time. So we've had 17 different...
What was the date you just said?
I'm sorry,
February
March 28th.
Okay.
Yep. So these are going to cover from March 28th until April 25th. So we've had 17 different intercepts to the hospital, ALS intercepts, 17 responses to the highway, 83 incidents in which just an ambulance responded and there was no reason for a fire resource to be sent. We've had 181 incidents that were overlapping, and again, because I've been talking about these different reports that we're able to run, I can just kind of give you an idea. Our overlapping incidents, they're again 181 different times, but they've ranged anywhere from 2 to 6 different incidents occurring at the same exact moment in time. I'm not sure this is something I'll print every month for you, but you get an idea in terms of the dates, how many calls were occurring, the alarm number, that kind of a thing. And you can see that it happens a lot. So give that some thought of what that means. That means of the 10 to 11 personnel that you have available at any given time, there's probably only half that available to respond at times. Other than that, the budget, I'm sorry, going back quickly on reports, I'm still working to make sure that I can give you accurate data on the new system that we have in terms of breakdown of calls. Started to work on it again some more, and again, just being an all-new system, I want to have consistency in the numbers that we report, and so we're taking the last couple of months, we're making sure that there's no errors. We have to build all the reports ourselves. They're not canned reports, they're built into the software, and so we're running the reports and then we're going back and we're trying to make sure that the reports are accurate. You know, don't forget, the system we've been using for 20, 25 years, and so I had a high degree of confidence in those reports because they were built and they were constantly checked against what was actively occurring. These, because we have to build them, we're just making sure we're capturing everything. So I don't anticipate any big change. You can see our call volume is still where it was last year, and we're still pretty much moving forward as we normally do.
Chief, when would you expect those reports to be completed and accurate to your expectations?
I would think by next month. I mean, the problem is we're using this system, but we're only using it for pieces at a time. If I start shifting now over to reports, then we're not doing payroll yet. We're not doing asset management yet. We're not doing fire marshal reports yet. You know, we're slowly implementing this system into everything that it's supposed to do. And so I'm really trying to stay focused on things like apparatus checks and equipment check and being able to take your iPad in the station and be able to go through and check all the apparatus. And so a lot of our admin resources regarding this program are focused on still building it out. The reports, Again, just having to build them and make sure that they're accurate is gonna take some time.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions on this overlapping reports. So there's some in there that are like 4, 6, 7 overlapping at the same time.
Yep.
Does that include overlapping that the fire department responds to and overlapping that maybe only an ambulance responds to? No, those are overlapping for just the fire department.
So those are pulling data from just fire alarm calls for service numbers. The numbers that I give you for ambulance have no fire alarm number assigned to it because there was no fire asset sent. So those are just incidents in which the fire department responded. It's going to be a mix of medical and fire, but they're all there.
Okay, and so when there's something like 7, there's no way to respond to 7, right? So do we know what happens to those calls, or are there a way to find out?
We send probably one truck. And so the call is covered because we're sending one truck. To the adequate resources, absolutely not.
But if you have 7, we don't have 7 to respond, do we?
With 7 vehicles, sure. That's about the maxed out that we're gonna have.
So if
But
it
that
was
would have
8,
to come from
so if it was 8,
volunteers.
so if it was 8,
Oh yeah, it's gonna come from
Then we'd have to-
volunteers,
yeah,
yeah,
we'd have to
oh,
wait.
yeah, all day long. Those, again, we don't, and this is I guess part of the struggle that we have right now, particularly when we start talking about the decline of the volunteers, is the career and the volunteers go to essentially the same exact calls. Now, we don't send the volunteers to all the calls the career go to, but when the CAT system is looking for the next unit to send, it doesn't care if it's a career unit or a volunteer unit. We don't send the volunteers to medicals because they're not certified to be able to respond, but when it's looking for the next fire call to send a unit to, it doesn't differentiate.
And for the ones that, is there a way to see, you know, was there, especially if the volunteers are responding, like the response time and things like that, kind of compare, you know, overlapping calls versus, and how that impacts response time?
If you wanted to grab one particular example, I could do that, but to run that for there's 181 occurrences, to run that for every one.
I'm thinking just about the ones where you've got, you know, 4, 6, 7, you're talking about a lot of.
Yeah, I don't think people realize how often that happens.
Yeah.
People often think that it's one call at a time that we're dealing with, and you can see, especially now with this new program, that's not the case. And so, you know, if you wanted to look through that and say, hey, for next month, can you get me an idea in terms of what happened on this particular day with these 7 calls that are occurring, I could dig in and give that to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
but Chief, correct me if I'm wrong. So, to Jenny's point, if all of our apparatus are out and we're calling for a volunteer engine to come in, generally it takes a period of time before they respond. The expectation is, based on our stats, 30 or 40% of the time they show up, right?
Yeah, I'd say half, 50% of the time.
50% of the time they show up. Potentially 50% of the time they're not going to show up. And then if they do show up, there's a lag time before they're able to get to the scene. So, and again, I think where you're coming from is what happens to that call.
We hold the call.
Yeah, we have to hold the call. So no matter what it is, we're going to have a delay in getting there. And as soon as we're able to potentially free up one of the 7 apparatus that we have with full-time firefighters, we'll release one of those to go to that call.
But the apparatus have the number of staff on it that.
So there's
Correct.
4 staffed apparatus.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's
Yep.
not like, okay, we can release 2 people and they can go. It has to be the number that needs to be
On
on
that
that apparatus.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we have no other vehicles to send. If we had, and what the chief has been advocating for, to have an officer in a car. So if the officer went to the scene and the scene was under control, and that officer would then be able to be released from that call and go to find out what's going on with the other call, I mean,
That's ideal.
that's ideal.
That's
I
what
mean,
all of our surrounding towns are doing.
so that's exactly what we're trying to accomplish. Unfortunately, we haven't been able to do that yet.
Okay.
Yes.
It's just important to know. So let's say, I mean, your career staff, okay, your 4 career staff, a rescue, 2 engines, and a truck, can be tied up on 2 calls. Okay? An incident on the highway and a cardiac arrest. Those 2 calls, you've now lost your entire career staff. So what's gonna, for a medical, we're gonna send just an ambulance. If there's no fire unit, if there's a fire unit called for, and there's no fire unit available to respond because the career staff are all tied up, you're getting just an ambulance from wherever the ambulance is responding from. We have a metrics in place for the ambulances that require them to be on scene within so many minutes, 90% of the time, but it could be that 10% of the time that it's not gonna meet the mark. If the system's in surge because there's that many calls going on, then the ambulances, as you read in the newspapers for what's happening in the area, they're also gonna take a while. So what's gonna happen is, if there's no career unit available to respond to a medical incident, the ambulance is gonna respond solo. If there's a fire call that comes in, the appropriate volunteer apparatus is gonna be dispatched, and then we wait. And the response time is 15 to 20 minutes before they sign on. So what are we doing during that period of time? We're waiting. That's the system that we have in North Haven. We wait to see if the volunteers are gonna sign on to respond to that call. And after, how long should I wait? 20, 25 minutes? Because that's in reality, that's what we're doing. And then after 20, 25 minutes, I guess this is one of the 50% of the time they're not going to respond. I'm hoping that in that 20 minutes I've cleared a career staff from something, but that's not necessarily economical or efficient or safe, right? But that's real life. That's what we deal with. There's that many calls going on, and there's only 4 staffed apparatus.
So when you look at the other night with that lightning and thunderstorm, and we all read where the department was out with a lightning strike of a home, all of our apparatus was out at that fire. And we had to call in Wallingford for support. So if we're all out there and another incident comes in, which probably did.
Look at the stats, how often it happens.
There it is. So we have no one to send out. We just have no one to send. So we'd like to think that our volunteers would be able to cover our stations while all of our paid staff is out to that fire, if they in fact are able to sign on.
And that's what I don't think that people necessarily realize, unfortunately, when they talk about the decline of volunteers, is they look at it as, all right, well, there's career staff. But this town runs simultaneous incidents at any given time, all the time. We went from having 6 volunteer engines, a career truck, a career rescue, and a career engine. So we had 9 apparatus available to cover essentially 9 calls, right? Again, not any better, not any worse than we're doing right now. Now we're down to 4 with an increase in call volume and the volunteer system. Not that long ago, the volunteers, if we had a call on this side of town, by the time we left headquarters and we're driving by this station, the engine for the volunteers was already pulling out ahead of us. And that's the system that we had up until about 10 years ago.
And keep in mind, when we started with the paid staff in 1967, we had 6 full-time firefighters, and we had close to 140, 150 volunteers, and numerous volunteers waiting in the wings. Now we have, in the teens, as far as volunteers are concerned, and 11 firefighters. So we don't have the manpower to do what we need to do, and when our call volume is up significantly, and that's why there's always the request for more personnel and more apparatus. And I think some people think that we're fear mongering or not being truthful in what we're saying, that we are asking for things that we want, not need, but we in fact need the personnel and apparatus to perform the duties that we're sworn to perform.
Right.
So,
Can I ask 2 other quick questions? The responses to the highway, you said 17. Are responses to the highway in general, and you may or may not be able to tell me this, but it would seem to me that when you're on a highway scene, in terms of time frame, even though you say 17, it would seem like there are longer periods of time than if you go to house and there's, something medical or some other type of emergency because of what it takes to clear up.
Sure, so you're absolutely right. I have to run that. I can probably get you an average, a mean and an average. I think that would be important numbers to look at. But having done this for a long time, I can tell you that most of the time when we go to the highway, we're on scene for half an hour to an hour, hour and a half sometimes. It's a matter of making sure that the scene is set up safely. It's a matter of getting the patients off to the hospitals. It's a matter of making sure that the vehicle's not leaking fuel, getting enough resources on scene so that when we leave, the troopers aren't getting hit by cars. So yes, that's certainly an accurate statement, is that the highway calls do take substantially long, and they take multiple resources.
Right.
I mean, a medical might take up only one resource, might be out of the system for an hour and a half, but it's one resource. A call on the highway is taken out at minimum 3, at minimum. So there's two other things that are dragging out the on-scene times. One is going to be electric vehicles, like we've talked about in the past, and the third, which I don't think people are necessarily correlating to an issue with the fire service, is how long it's taking right now at the hospitals. The hospitals are extremely overcrowded. Yale is going through, and no different than other healthcare systems, Yale's not alone. Last 2 months ago, there was a Hartford area hospital that was going through the same thing, but the hospitals are in complete crisis modes. There are no beds available. They're putting people in the hallways in the triage times. So what do I mean by triage? I mean when our staff bring the patient to the hospital and transfer care over to a nurse, that time period is taking upwards of, it used to be about a half an hour, it's creeping up to an hour now, and it might go higher. And so for that entire period of time, we're losing typically a paramedic and an apparatus, because we can't control how long it takes. There could be 10 ambulances before you, and you've got a patient that you've got to just literally wait in line for, keep stabilized, and wait for a room to open up. And it's not going to get any better. We had a meeting with all the fire chiefs in the area last week. Yale called for an emergency meeting, and they let us know just how critical it's become. And so when you hear how bad the ERs are, many people don't bring that back to think, hey, that's really impacting probably my fire department as well.
Is COVID playing a role in that crisis?
Did COVID?
Is it?
I don't think it is anymore, no. It was at one time. Now it just looks like it's just census, and it's just, if you pull up the stats from 2021 on the OEMS website, you'll see Yale New Haven Hospital is the busiest ER in the state. It's just a busy area we're in.
My expectation, Pat, is the hospital has the same dilemma that every other employer has. You know, trying to find the workforce to come in to perform the duties. And I'm not sure, Chief, and you might be able to answer this, but my guess is they're probably understaffed
Yes.
at the ER, which is
Sure.
causing that lag, which then causes our paramedics to be there longer and out of service, and you know, providing the services for the person that they just brought to the ER, and then they're out of service for us not being able to be on duty here in town. So it really is a catch-22 kind of a situation for us.
I mean, to give you just some perspective on the way the hospital system works as well, because we're this far into the conversation, so I'd hate to leave anything kind of unturned. When we transport to the hospital, it is not always the patient's choice where they want to go. I mean, it ultimately is the patient's choice. I should never say that, but the hospital is recommending which campus to go to. And that is turning into either the New Haven campuses, sometimes Milford, and there's a possibility we may be diverted to Bridgeport soon.
Wow.
Because the health system is trying to balance its resources amongst the different campuses. And so they're giving you a recommendation based on patient acuity and based on how busy it is. And so it's not just the ED, it's are the floors backed up from discharges, and are people stuck in the ER waiting for a bed to open on the floor? And that's what's creating that backlog.
And are we always going to Yale?
Nope, we go to Mid-State probably 15% of the time, and then New Haven, the rest. The VA probably 5%, but not a lot.
What's the distance to Midtown from here?
To the hospitals,
In
I-
Midtown?
Mid-State.
to
Oh,
Mid-State.
Mid-State, sorry.
To Mid-State, well, it depends on which side of town we're talking. It's interesting. I don't have the distance off the top of my head, but I do know that when we're looking at having the apparatus from here respond to the hospital, pick up the paramedic, it's almost the same distance to the hospital as it is to the north end of town from here. So, in theory, you think, oh, the engine's going to the hospital, pick up a medic. It's really not that much farther than going to Knockall Avenue.
While we're on this whole hospital, I know the transport to the hospital, is that where the paramedic billing comes in?
Yes.
Yes. So I know this was a topic of conversation during our last Board of Finance meeting, but in terms of bang for your buck, it's not necessarily always, you know, if we're having to transport to the hospital and then tie up all those resources, although it brings some revenue in, it's not necessarily a cost-effective use of time.
Well,
Is that
because-
correct?
Yeah, absolutely, because now the paramedic is no longer in service to provide the services for residents in the town.
Or the firefighter.
Or
Or
the
the
firefighters.
firefighters, right. So, yeah, because now, absolutely.
Yeah, I just was curious about that, because I know this came up, you know, this push for paramedic billing, but I'm not so sure that they, that the Board of Finance understands the impact on the staff and the cost.
Which is one of the reasons why I struggle with the fact that, you know, sure, we can start increasing our billing. But to do so, it'll be taking our paramedic out of service that much more.
Right.
So, and that's what I know that Mike Fried and I have spoken about a lot, and to him, it's more important that we keep the paramedics in town and in service at all possible, and only transport and assist when it's critically needed. And, you know, we're seeing that happen more and more with the system surge. I mean, one thing to keep in mind is that the EMS system in Connecticut is broken. Not in North Haven, but in Connecticut it's broken. Our 2 ambulances, or 3 ambulances, depending on the time of day, that are committed to North Haven, if another town calls for them, they have to respond. So this mindset that we have, these ambulances in North Haven that are exclusive of North Haven, is a false mindset. It's nothing we can do to control it. There's nothing we can put in our contract. It's governed by state statute. We sometimes have no ambulances in town because they're assisting other communities that are short-staffed.
So once we were designated as an ambulance, other municipalities have dibs on our equipment. That brings up another point. When we go to the highway, and we have 2 or 3 apparatus there, we're using our tools, our equipment, our manpower, whatever it might be, we're not reimbursed by anyone. That's all underwritten by the taxpayer. So, you know, there was a time when the state was reimbursing something when a volunteer participated, but my understanding is that fund ran out of money. It was like $200 or $250.
It was back for this fiscal year, and it looks like it might go away again next
Yeah.
fiscal year.
So that's all on our dime.
Right.
So, you know, when visitors or persons who are driving through the state, and keep in mind, we patrol a significant portion of highway as a fire department, that's all on the taxpayers' dime for us to be tied up on that highway. There was an accident on 91 yesterday, in the morning, I think it was yesterday, that a couple of cars that were tied up the highway for a period of time. You know, it's just mind-boggling how much time we spend on the highway and away from town in order to perform the services and duties that we're sworn to deliver. So those are the kind of things that I think everyone needs to clearly understand. We only have the apparatus and Broadway and here at Montague's to respond to any issues.
Highway-wise, we have how many exits? 3 on 91?
So we covered 12 through 9, and then sometimes we're dispatched further south into exit 8 because we cover a stretch from 9 to 8, and then we cover a stretch from 12 to 13 as well. And then the same thing with the Parkway,
And then the Parkway.
and then Route
And
40.
then Route 40.
Are there any other towns that have that many stretches of highway that you know of?
So I'm told that North Haven has the highest number of laned highway miles in the state because we have so much highway, and it's 4 lanes for a good period of time and 91 in both directions. I've never been able to find that in quite some time. I think I did validate it probably 6-7 years ago when I was running a grant for education equipment. I haven't looked at it again in a while, but nonetheless, we're definitely up there.
It's a lot.
We're pretty high.
It's a lot.
One thing that's going to help is the state's putting in highway cameras in this area pretty soon. If you actually look, they're starting to go up right now, the polls for them. So it's going to help in our response because I can tell you that many times that we have to respond to the highway, it is a wild goose chase trying to figure out where it is. because by the time that most people that call 911 don't take necessarily don't take note of where exactly the incident is, and so by the time the dispatcher gets around to asking, the caller looks up and they're, let's say, a mile or an exit away.
Right.
So we're dispatched sometimes to a completely different area than what we thought we were going to. Believe it or not, one of the things that we use, and it might sound silly, but it works right now until we have cameras, is Waze. Oftentimes it's reported on Waze where the accident is, so in the iPads that we have in the apparatus, we can pull up Waze in real time and see whether there's an accident reported and see the traffic backing up.
Okay.
Very interesting.
Finishing up with the chief's report, the current budget. Last year, this time, we were at 87.3%. As we sit here today, we're at 84.4%. That brings us through period 10, which we're finishing up now. Since our last meeting, in terms of the budget, we've collected just over $26,000 in permit fees. That brings us just over $447,000 total this fiscal year in permit fees.
Can you give me that number one more time?
Sure, just over $26,000 since our last meeting, and just over $447,000 this fiscal year. Staffing that's impacting the budget, I have one vacancy that I've been carrying for some period of time that we hope to fill in the next couple of months, and we'll determine if we need to send the individual to the academy or not. I can discuss that further under executive session. The Fire Marshal's office, you were all provided with a copy of the Fire Marshal's report. You can see on there the number of inspections, permits, and so forth, plan reviews that were conducted by the Fire Marshal's office for the month of March, as well as a report that was filed showing the number of fires in the month of March and what the suspected cause was. That is your Fire Marshal's report. And other than that, one thing I wanted to bring to the Commission's attention was we had an incident occur probably last week sometime where it was a building fire that was reported on a street with a common name as a New Haven street as well. And so we responded, and it came in as a building fire. I listened to the call. The caller called in that the room was on fire, that it was getting worse, and said, I have to go, it's getting worse, I have to do something, and hung up, leading us to believe that the individual was trapped. We responded to the residents. The resident at the home had no idea what we were doing there. We worked with New Haven and checked the same address for the street in New Haven, because sometimes there is a mix-up, especially when you're calling from cell phones. There was no incident at the New Haven address. It's been forwarded to the North Haven Police Department. We provided a number of documents, and we're actively investigating with the police department the incident and suspected to be fraudulent. So if we can ever narrow it down, we'll look to pursue charges, and it's just a matter of working with warrants, with cell phone companies and so forth. We've got to try to see if we can narrow down who it was. There was a similar incident in the schools a couple of months ago, and I think in the movie theaters even before that. So the same process is taking place now. So it was unusual, and we're keeping an eye on it. It's really something I hope doesn't start to become common practice, because we devote a lot of resources when we hear something like that, and then we devote a lot of resources making sure that it was a false call. There's a lot of street names in this town that sound very similar or have different extensions, road, drive, avenue. And so when you start thinking back, you have to go back and look at all these different addresses it might be. It commits a lot of resources. That's what I have for our chief's report.
Any other questions of the chief? Yes, Pat, go ahead.
I noticed that this month's budget report has a new format.
Yeah, it does.
It does.
Yep.
So it provides much more detail. And I like the fact that it's showing, for utilities, it's showing the utilization of each of the stations.
Yep, we've been working with finance to make sure that some of the sub-accounts are reporting to the correct account numbers. And so you'll see that there's some extremes that are in the budget report that if you have questions about it, I can speak to it, but overall, we're trending okay with the overall budget, and honestly, that's the number that I look at. The lines in many ways are projected. The overall budget is where we strive to stay in.
I think that's pretty typical of every business. I mean, you create a budget and a year in advance, and nobody ever projected that we would have the kind of
18
economy,
months in advance.
the kind of
Yeah.
economy that we have
Yep.
with inflation. And if we can stay within that budget, the total budget line, I think will be a success. I know people will complain about individual lines, but in the meantime, I think it's a good thing to look at the bottom line.
I agree. I've budgeted most of my professional life, and it was normally the bottom line that people looked at
Yep.
and to account for.
Well, I'll
I know.
hold off for a
I know.
minute. I think we might unfortunately have a substantial cost coming up, but
Yeah.
we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions
What
of the
line?
chief?
Apparatus repair.
Yeah. Well, any other questions of the chief regarding his report?
Let's-
Hearing none, we'll move on to correspondence. Chief, have you received any correspondence?
I have no correspondence other than I know what you have there.
Okay. Any other commissioners receive any correspondence? So I'm going to read a correspondence that was directed to Michael Frieda, First Selectman, Town of North Haven. This was dated April 13th, received on April 20th. This was a note, dear Mr. Frieda, encloses a copy of the narrative for the Town of North Haven Fire Department from an inspection conducted by Scott Adams. If you need any further assistance or have any questions, please contact Mr. Adams and a phone number. And Mr. Adams is the director of Connecticut OSHA. So as you are aware, as a result of the December 26th online death of a firefighter, OSHA and another federal agency is coming in to do investigations of the North Haven Fire Department. And this narrative was created, and I'm going to read it as it was read, as it was submitted. So the investigation was initiated in response to a reported firefighter fatality in the town of North Haven on December 26, 2022. An opening conference was held on December 27th, and the purpose, scope, and nature of the investigation was explained. On December 26, 2022, at approximately 1:30 a.m., the town of North Haven received a call for an occupied residential structure fire. The first arriving engine contained a crew of 3. Upon arrival, the engine staged in the rear of the residence. The engine officer began a walk-around of the structure while the driver and nozzle man proceeded to lay a line to the 3rd floor. The driver then returned to operate the pump panel. The driver then assisted another firefighter with a SCBA bottle change. Shortly thereafter, the firefighter who had the bottle change noticed that the driver had collapsed and called out a mayday. Paramedics on scene initiated care and transported the firefighter to Yale New Haven Hospital, where the firefighter was pronounced deceased after suffering a cardiac event. Connecticut OSHA did not note any violations of OSHA standards and no citations are proposed. A closing conference was held on March 16, 2023, and the filings were discussed. So this is the complete report from OSHA, read as submitted. If you'd like to take a look at this report, you're welcome to do so. The next report will be, the next investigation is in progress, or
In a
should
couple
be
weeks.
in a couple of weeks. Our expectation is it will be a 5-day investigation, and the likelihood is it will be a number of months before that report is finalized and submitted to the First Selectman and copies to us.
And
Is that
what,
also being done by OSHA?
It is not being done by OSHA. It'll be done by a separate organization, which is
NIOSH,
NIOSH. And what does NIOSH mean?
National Institute of Safety and Health. It's a division of the CDC.
Okay. So, any questions on this report? Unfortunately, I can't add or delete from this. The report is as is, submitted by the professionals that conducted the report, the investigation. Any other correspondence? Hearing none, we'll move on to old business.
Old business, we continue with the leased engine that's in service at West Ridge, which is our most active volunteer firehouse. That line, that expense is continuing to be $3,000 a month, which was unbudgeted for. The apparatus that was struck on the highway, believe it or not, sounds like it might be in service, maybe by our next meeting. It's down to the last few items that need to get done on it. We're getting weekly reports we receive, and I'm encouraged by some of the reports that look like it's in the final stages of being repaired. So that'll be good. That went out of service in December of 2021.
It's engine 9.
Correct, it was engine 9 at that time. Yep. And again, the delivery of 2 new engines has been delayed until March of 2024, and that order was placed May of 2021. So it is my expectation that we're going to hold on to the leased engine until we receive the 2 new engines. Every day, it is a moving target with our apparatus. As we sit here today, we're struggling to keep apparatus in service, and we're using some very old apparatus to kind of cover our incidents. So it's the current engine 1, for example, from headquarters has some repairs being done to it. Fire engines are very maintenance heavy. We do not have a maintenance division here. Everything we do for maintenance has to be sent out, and when we sent it out, we often wait in line like everybody else. So it's a struggle to keep the apparatus in service, and so I think that we keep that leased engine here for the foreseeable future, and we'll continue to kind of see where we're at with our fleet.
Is engine 1 out of service then?
So not the physical apparatus is, right, but you're still going to hear or see engine 1, or at least hear engine 1. When we shift over to the apparatus, the identifier in the radio is the same thing, no matter what apparatus we're physically using. Yeah.
How about the ladder?
So I was going to cover that under new business, which is next. So the tower ladder was involved in an accident. So we think about the tower ladder. It's we have 2 aerial devices in town. This is the one with the big bucket that hangs off the back. That was involved in a motor vehicle accident a few weeks ago. It was removed from service immediately to be looked at by an independent evaluator to determine if there was anything specific to the tower itself. And so when I say the tower, the bucket itself, certainly we don't want to be putting people in that 100 feet in the air and have it be unstable. And so for safety reasons, it was taken out of service immediately. It was evaluated. And it is going to need some repairs subsequent to the accident. We're working with the town to determine if insurance will cover any of this or not, and we expect that ladder to be out of service for another 3 to 4 weeks. So in the meantime, we're using the reserve ladder that we have that's normally assigned at Northeast. You'll see it's not there right now. It hasn't been for a couple of weeks. We're using it at headquarters. So it's a good thing that we purchased that second ladder. It was used, but it's still fulfilled the need. I'd rather have a ladder truck in town that's used than no ladder truck at all in town. So more to come on that. I'm still trying to, as they begin to do the repairs, I'll have a better idea on what the overall cost is. So I don't know if that's going to hit the apparatus line. It's looking like it's going to be somewhere between $50,000 and $100,000 in repairs.
You had talked about in the past a mechanic. How many departments actually have a mechanic on staff?
I can find out. There's a great deal of them that do.
And in terms of the benefits, would it help to reduce the cost of repair
Sure.
and then reduce the amount of time?
100% yes and yes. There's a reason why, again, the departments, especially all around us, all have mechanics, is because we pay a markup on the parts. When there's repairs needed, think about these apparatus. There's not only the apparatus, there's the electrical systems, the pump systems, the ladders, the hydraulic systems. I don't speak mechanic. So when somebody's telling me some of the things that it needs, I don't know enough to say, well, did you check these 3 things before you came to this conclusion? It'd be like taking your car to the shop, to the dealer every time and paying a premium. That's what we do. And because we can't conduct any of the repairs ourselves, We send everything out, and it impacts our operations.
What are the things that if a mechanic got added to the budget, are there certain things that they couldn't do necessarily, we'd still have to send out?
Sure there are. There's gonna be certain things that, depending on the facility that we're able to accommodate a mechanic and so forth, there's two things keeping us from doing it right now. One is, we don't have the facility for them to be able to work out of,
Okay.
and the second is, it's not in the labor contract.
Okay, so that would be something you have to add to the labor contract?
I would think so, yeah.
Okay.
It's in most, all the departments that have mechanics all around us, so that they all have, the mechanic is part of the labor union.
The facility to work on it would be a Boston expense. You have to have a huge building to work on those things.
Well, a huge building with a pit.
Yes.
Or
so
tracks.
Yeah.
So the truck would have to drive over a pit. The other thing, to answer your question, I think there are various components of the apparatus that are very specialized. And correct me if I'm wrong, Chief, you need a special license for the pumps or electrical or whatever it might be. So a mechanic might be able to take care of the routine preventive maintenance that would eliminate the tying up of a vehicle for oil changes, tire rotations, filters, headlights out, maybe brakes or whatever it might be. But there are some of the other components of the apparatus that you need a specialty license for in order to work on the apparatus. And that's where, when we take it to certain places, they have all those licensures. So I think, we've spoken about this a number of times for many years. And even for the chief's cars. I mean, if you had a mechanic there, we potentially, many times we'll send it out to Marolas or whatever it might be to get done, and they're kind enough to put them ahead of the list in order to get things done and get them out. But when if it's covered under a manufacturer guarantee, you need to go to the manufacturer or to the dealer to get it done, as they did with the transmissions for these cars that were laid up. So it could in fact help us immensely, even with the preventive maintenance. Keep in mind, look at all the other tools that we have, whether it be saws or drills or whatever. If you have a mechanic that really understands those type of tools, they can be helpful in the preventive maintenance for those as well. So I think there's an argument for potentially a mechanic, and we've argued this point a while ago. But as the chief said, it's collective bargaining and having a facility for the mechanic to operate.
Can the labor contract be amended to
No.
include mechanic?
I don't know.
They used to have one. There used to be a mechanic on.
There was, I don't know if it was part of the labor contract,
Yeah.
but we,
But he
when I,
used to, yeah.
when I was first hired, we contracted with a mechanic
Yes.
service that was basically in the station almost every day.
Almost, yes.
And sometimes two. And keeping track of our fleet, keeping up with everything, working on it. And when you have a vested interest in the fleet and the apparatus, you take much better care of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
But he got old. He retired.
Two follow-up questions. Does the town have any mechanics in any departments?
DPW. It's all the mechanics in
Public Works have a
DPW.
mechanic.
Right, but the problem is going back, the chairman saying, they're
I know,
not certified to be able to
specialized, yeah.
work on fire apparatus. Right.
And then just one other place that my brain started to go to. Is there any possibility, in being able to use some of the resources from some of the other towns that have, like to be able to contract with them versus taking it to a commercial place that may take a lot longer, leave the apparatus or out of service longer?
So it's been talked about at some different chiefs meetings. What I can tell you is the departments that have mechanics, they're busy with their own fleets. And obviously their fleet's gonna take priority. With the admin cars, the rescues, the engines, the trucks, the saws, all of the fans, we've got enough easily for a full-time person, if not a full-timer and a part-timer. Just because when you are doing work, sometimes you need an extra set of hands. We've never been successful in pursuing that, and again, unfortunately, when the stations were built, there was a bay cut from each of the 3 stations, outlying stations, and I know the intent was to put a mechanics bay in one of those. So there's a lot working against us with this. So in the meantime, we're sending everything out, and it's a compounding effect of what we're dealing with.
Are you sending out within North Haven?
Depends on what it is. Some apparatus, if it's under warranty, it's going to Waterford, and others are going into North Haven here, yeah. Just depends on what the issue is. Sometimes, if it's Cummins, or if it's, Allison, or if it's Rocky Hill, it's going to McDermott, it's going anywhere right now.
We kind of switched over into.
New business?
into
That's all I have for new
Into new
business.
business
Yeah.
there.
I just have one thing, just to go back to old business. I think we talked about this last month. Is there any way to get our packets on Friday? Just because when they come on Monday, in the middle of the day, it makes it harder to kind of review stuff. And I know it means that it may not be up to date from, it, could be a couple of days later. But I just find if you get them on Monday, it makes it very hard if you have something Monday
Yeah,
night
yeah.
to
We'll try.
actually get to review them.
Yep, we'll certainly try.
Okay.
Any other old or new business? Good of the department.
The only thing I have is both recruits are doing well in the academy. Their anticipated graduation date is May 24th, and you should receive notice of a swearing-in ceremony. It's going to include those 2 recruits as well as a couple of promotions. It's going to occur on May 26th at 3 o'clock. You should all receive notice for that, and I look forward to seeing you there.
Perfect. Parade, chief, is that coming up?
Yes, this Saturday, Memorial Day parade, yeah. We should have a meeting between now and then.
Okay. Anything else for the good of the department? Hearing none, ask for public comments. I see there's no one here. I'll entertain a motion to move into executive session.
So moved.
Do I hear a second? I'd like to reconvene the Tuesday, April 25th, 2023, North Haven Fire Commission meeting to order. Is there any further business coming before this commission? Hearing none, I'd like to announce that the next regularly scheduled Board of Fire Commission meeting will be on Tuesday, May 23rd, 2023 at 6 p.m. at Mondelez Company 2, 282 Quinnipiac Avenue. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.